Hello friends, I'm back. I'm Lily and this is Lily's Natural Life, where I talk all about naturopathic medicine and naturopathic medical school. So yes, it has been a while. I've been at school. It is very busy, as you might assume, and it's been online, so it's been a very different experience from anything I've had before. I graduated before COVID hit, so I never had to do purely online school. So I would like to talk a little bit about how it went. So let's start with orientation. It was fine, kind of boring. For me, I already knew a lot of the information because I went to the smoothie socials that they'd been holding online. So those are like, I think they occur every 2 weeks. They're webinars that are hosted by the admissions advisors, and they were really informative. So go to those if you want to learn some more information before you start school, or since you're going to hear most of the information again during orientation week, you could skip them, but I definitely did learn more information from the smoothie socials than orientation. But orientation was just kind of, it was a long process and wasn't the most effective use of our time. It probably could have been cut in like half because we had to do orientation online, so we had a whole online program. And then we had in-person orientation, or Natural Advantage, which was a week long. And we got on Zoom and we were live, and we had different presenters speak to us about different things. And sometimes we would have breakout rooms and we would get to kind of get to know each other a little bit if there was extra time, but we usually had specific activities that we had to do, like learning about different note-taking strategies, learning how to make OneNotes, learning how to structure your day, come up with a schedule, that kind of stuff, which was somewhat important, but in the end you have to figure out what works for you. So it was kind of nice to get to know other methods of preparing for school, but it's kind of go with the flow, figure it out as you go. Now on to actual school. I'm gonna preface this. Personally, I didn't expect to, but I actually liked the online format. I don't mind it. I do kind of like it, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can go to another city, you can be out of state, you can do school wherever, which is really cool. You can have a little mini vacation and you're still in school, you're not missing anything, which is really nice. And okay, at the beginning, I started off waking up at like 6 a.m., sometimes 5:30, and that just was not really working for me. I had done that for so long, from a high school all the way through college, and I thought I could do it still in med school, but for some reason, it wasn't quite working for me. So then I started getting up later and later and cutting my mornings shorter, which, maybe not that great. But with the online school, I ended up like waking up at 7:45, 7:50. Sometimes I wouldn't get out of bed till 7:55. This is all within 15 minutes, 10-15 minutes. School would start at 8 a.m. and it was really nice to just be able to like roll out of bed and go to my desk and start school. So I think that's definitely a benefit of online school. If you follow me on Instagram, you knew that I was taking 25 credits, which was 26 hours of class per week, which is a lot of time. And so it was definitely challenging. The first week, it was so slow at the beginning of the week. I had 2 classes because I didn't have lab on Tuesday. So by Wednesday, I was like so on top of it. Things were so easy because I'd only had 2 classes. I had done all my notes, I'd made Anki cards, I had studied, I was feeling so good. And then Wednesday hit, and it was such a long day. So I was pretty pooped by the end of it. Plus, I hadn't been in school for a little while, so it was just different having such a long work day. Like, I was doing practically nothing during the lockdown. So that was a bit different. Plus, being online is just different. It's hard on your eyes, and being sedentary. Not that I wasn't that sedentary before. But anyways, it was a long day. And then Thursday, oh my gosh, our first anatomy lab class was just so confusing. We didn't know what we were doing, and it's online. So for anatomy lab, we had an app called Complete Anatomy that we used. to look at the anatomical structures and find different parts of the body and label them and all of that. But I don't know, it was just so confusing for me and my group. Like, maybe it was just because it was the end of the day and I had done a study group that morning and we tried to study, and it was just overwhelming because there were a lot of people and a lot of things going on, and I was just pooped after that. So that was Thursday, and I couldn't get much done after that. And then Friday was another long day, and on Fridays at SCNM we get a 2-hour lunch break. So instead of 12 to 1, we have 12 to 2. So that means our classes were still going late into the evening. They ended at 5 on Fridays. So it was another long day, and by the end of the week I was pooped, I was very tired, and I was also freaking out because I felt like I was behind on schoolwork. I was not ahead of schedule, which I've talked about on my Instagram, that throughout undergrad and high school I always like to be ahead of schedule, on top of things, because that would calm my anxiety and stress down. But then now I was at Friday night and I had so much work to do. I had to catch up on studying basically from Wednesday to Friday, and I didn't know if I would be able to do it, and I only had 2 weekend days, and I knew I was just going to get more material that I was going to have to learn, and so I was kind of freaking out. But luckily I was able to like calm myself down, just schedule out exactly what I needed to do and just focus one thing at a time, and I ended up getting way more done than I was expecting to, which was really good. But yes, it was normal that I was freaking out, and if you are freaking out, or anyone else that's starting medical school is a little overwhelmed at the end of the week, that is completely normal. If you want tips on how to handle medical school, how to just make life easier, I think I'll do a video on that in the future. But for this video, I'm just going to talk about the structure of school, considering maybe we'll still be online. I don't know, just to give you an idea of what naturopathic medical school is like for Q1, and more specifically SCNM. So the 3 main science classes are biochemistry, anatomy, and physiology. Biochem does not have a lab, anatomy has a lab, and physiology has a lab as well. Biochemistry, for that online, it was structured where we had a pre-recorded, actually 3 pre-recorded lectures that were posted on Monday, and then on Friday we would have in-person class where our professor would discuss all of the information and answer questions, stuff like that, which was, some people liked that structure, some people did not. It was a little different at first for me, and I didn't think I was gonna enjoy it because I like in-person classes, like live classes. But it actually worked out well. I enjoyed it. Gave us a lot of time throughout the week to go over the material and get a pretty good understanding. For me, pretty good understanding. And then by the end of the week, if there was any last little bit that was still confusing, we would go over with the professor, and it was just another day, another set time frame, where we would go over the information, even though towards the end of the quarter I wasn't always completely paying attention in that last class. It was another time that I could hear the information again in my head, so it helped to solidify the information. Next up, anatomy lecture. So the lecture is worth 1 more credit than the lab. If you go to SCNM, just so you know, I think it's probably the same at other schools, but it's worth a little bit more. And for lecture, we had kind of a mix of structure for that class. At first, we had some live lectures, which was basically normal class, and then other times we had some pre-recorded lectures that we were expected to watch before class, and then we'd come to class and do Q&A. This fluctuated some because we had some people that liked the format, some people didn't like the format, some felt like it was a waste of time because then we had double class if we had to watch the lecture outside of class, and then have a full set amount of lecture time for questions and stuff. And we started off with the questions were not in order, so it was hard to follow. By the end, I think maybe I just got used to it, but it didn't seem as bad. So by the end, we ended up just doing a pre-recorded lecture. Most of the time it was a pre-recorded lecture, and then we would do an hour of live class for questions instead of the 2 hours. And the pre-recorded lecture was usually about an hour, which was good, but it was unfortunate when sometimes it was more than an hour and we didn't realize, and so we would have to watch it a little faster, and that was more difficult. but I would recommend watching it before the set class time if everything is still going as it's going now. Please excuse my cat. He be confused about the winter solstice, and I think he thinks it's dinner time even though it is not dinner time. So where was I? Yes, physiology class. Physiology, my professor was great. He was very organized in the way he gave us materials. Sometimes his PowerPoints were a little bit confusing, so were the anatomy ones, so were biochem. But that's just life sometimes. But yes, his class was pretty straightforward, and it was live lecture, and then he posted recordings, which was really great. And he posted recordings from the previous quarters as well, which was really handy. And he gave us a study guide, and yeah, that was the most smooth sailing class for sure. And his lab was very smooth sailing as well. We just met for the 2-hour time frame and we did our lab online. He showed us what to do. We had quizzes each lab, and then we filled out the lab reports, and that was about it. And then for anatomy lab, that took us a bit of figuring out how to best learn the information online. We started off going through like you would in actual anatomy lab, like going through a cadaver but on the app, each part, and seeing where it was in relation to other parts, but that didn't seem very effective to us. And then we realized we needed to do more of our own studying by the end of the quarter, so that at that point we would just kind of study on our own for about an hour, and then we would come back together and discuss what we found, any interesting findings or tips and tricks for remembering the different parts of the body and how they relate to each other. And then of course at the end of class we had a review with the whole class, and we had the intro part of the class with the whole class too. So anatomy lab was 3 hours. Yeah, it was a 3-hour long class, and you're split into lab groups. My lab group was about 8 people, I believe. So it was a little rough at the beginning, but we got it all figured out. But yes. The resources we used for that class, so obviously we had a textbook, we had the Complete Anatomy app, which is usable on both iPad, you can use it on your phone, but I think that would be really difficult, and the computer. So you just have to get the app, and it's paid for by the school, at least for my school. And then we also used Ackland videos, which are very, very old, but also super helpful, which are cadaver videos of different cadavers, and there's a man that's talking about the different parts and how they relate to each other, and they show you on the cadaver, and those are super helpful. So we did those as well. And then, did I already say the textbook? The textbook. For lab practical exams, we had an image with an arrow pointing to a specific part, and this image could come from our textbook, it could come from Complete Anatomy, or it could be a cadaver picture. And so that's how we did our lab practicals. Lastly, I'll just mention the other classes we had to take. So of course we had our clinical practice class, so we had a lecture and a lab for that. Lecture was learning the material in lecture form pretty much, and the practical was learning how to do, write, take soap notes, and how to do vitals, take vitals, and that was pretty much what we covered. We covered like pertinent positives and pertinent negatives, which you'll cover if you're going to naturopathic medical school, or not, or going to regular medical school or something else. But yeah, you learn how to chart patient notes, which are called soap notes. And for practicals, sometimes we would be split up, not for the actual practical, but to practice for the practical. We would get split up into partners and practice asking each other questions, doing the patient interview, practice the vital situation. And for the actual vital practical, what we did is we had to dress in the proper clinic attire. We had to have our sphygmomanometer present. We needed a watch, we needed a stethoscope, we needed a thermometer with probe covers if it was oral. And basically what we had to do is describe everything we would do for the vitals, from seeing a patient, describing how they look, but really we would be taking note of how they look, in our head, and how we would take temperature, how we would take pulse, respirations, blood pressure, and pulse, respiration, blood pressure. That was it. Oh gosh. Pulse, respiration, temperature, temperature. Pulse, respirations, temperature, and blood pressure. And you could use a model or you could not use a model. I ended up not having a model to do the blood pressure on, so I just wrapped it around the armrest of my chair, and I used the sphygmomanometer, pumped it up to however much it needed to be pumped up. Us, it was 200. And so then we had to show the proctor, live proctor, what it was at, and show them the speed with which we would decrease the amount of pressure, and describe basically everything that we would do if we were in person. And that included if we saw someone walking and we had to describe their gait, we would say that we observed their gait instead of just saying how their gait was, if you know what I mean. So we had to describe every single thing. Then we had a research class, which was interesting. We learned about research. Not a lot of work to do in that class. We did have to read papers and create a research set up a research project. And then we had naturopathic, the foundations of naturopathic medicine, which was, I thought, a really interesting class because I'm also interested in philosophy and obviously naturopathic medicine, so it should be interesting because it's about the history of it. And we also got to learn about hydrotherapy, homeopathy, mind-body medicine. And so we started learning about different modalities that we'll go into further in later quarters. And then lastly, we had an ICSA class, ICSA, which stands for Integrated Case Studies something. We just call it ICSA, and so that was anatomy and physiology kind of meshed together, and that was when we would have a personal quiz that we had to do that incorporated information from anatomy and physiology that was more related to applicable clinical type questions, or just questions about the material in general. And then we would get in a group and we would take the quiz again, but we'd have group members to help us with the answers. And then lastly, we would have another assignment that we would do as a group, which was very much clinical related. So we would have patients, or we had to answer questions that were more clinically relevant, I would say. So that was an interesting class. It was fun, but it was also kind of a lot of pressure because it was a very important class. If you fail that class, then you can't go on to the next quarter. But luckily it went smoothly, and that was the whole Q1. And I'm really happy to be finished with Q1. It's so weird to be into medical school. I am officially a medical school student, which is really fun, and I've really enjoyed everything I've learned. I've enjoyed the challenges. I've met some great people, and it's been a great experience so far. So if you have any more questions, definitely comment down below. Find me on Instagram, send me a message. Remember to like and subscribe if you thought this was helpful, and I will post some more videos about what helped me throughout the quarter. Bye!